Welcome to Taking Care of Lady Business, where we put the business back in lady business. Hosted by Jennifer Justice, founder and CEO of the Justice Department, a management strategy and law firm that works with female and woke male entrepreneurs, executives, talent, brands, and creatives to build and maximize their wealth, focusing in the areas of tech, consumer product, finance, media, entertainment, and fashion. Jennifer interviews entrepreneurial women who have done it all, who will be sharing their secrets on all things business, especially as a woman. These highly successful women will share strategies and insights, including what not to do and what it takes to win. And now, here's your host, Jennifer Justice.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Taking Care of Lady Business. It's been a while. We're in season 2 now, so it's all very exciting to meet all these new, amazing, impressive women. And today we have the amazing and impressive Aliza Licht. She is the founder and president of Leave Your Mark and an amazing podcaster of a podcast. So I was on it once and it was awesome. Check hers out, and an author as well. Hi, Aliza. Thank you for being on.
Hi, Jennifer. It's so good to see you. And I love that we're podcasting again, because, you know, it's such quality time when you think about it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's like it's fun for us because we get to catch up. I also get to interview you and learn a lot more about you than I already know. And also sharing it with all the people who are now back out there traveling and need things to listen to.
Yeah, sure. We're excited. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's start with Leave Your Mark. What is it? And why does everybody need to listen to it?
So Leave Your Mark is a couple things. I like to think of it as a multimedia brand in a way. So it is my book, Leave Your Mark, which is basically a virtual mentorship, how to land your dream job, kill it in your career, rock social media, which stemmed from my former social media personality that I was back in the day, called DKNY PR Girl, in my former life as a publicist for Donna Karan. And that sort of snowballed into a podcast. So the whole idea is like freshly brewed career advice. So every Sunday, that's what I dish out. That's what you dished out when you came on Leave Your Mark. And it's also a community where I mentor young professionals. And then finally, and I guess the least sexy side of it, is really my consultancy. So taking my marketing, communications, and digital experience that I've amassed over, I don't know, almost more than 2 decades now, and bringing that to brands, and now more so actually individuals from a personal branding perspective. So it's a whole mix of things, but I put it all in.
Mixed with a common thread of like consumer facing, right, with a brand, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's consumer facing brands, but it's also us as people as brands, right?
Yeah.
So it's how everyone presents basically to the world.
So people come to you and say, make me a brand, or how do I present? I mean, how does it work? Give us like a day in the life or a project, you know, for you, so people can really understand.
I think it comes down to storytelling, actually.
Yeah.
I think, you know, at the end of the day, whether you are someone who doesn't know how to tell your own story, or you're a company that's starting, or you're a heritage brand that has sort of been around the block a few times and needs to get kind of tap back into why you started in the first place, all of those are connected by the narrative. And I think that's what drives me. And in later years, figuring out how to tell that story online through social media is really what I get excited about.
Right. And what kinds of social media?
All the kinds, all of the
Really?
kinds. I am pretty agnostic these days. You know, I started my social career, if you will, on Twitter.
Yeah.
Moved over to Tumblr back in the day, and Instagram, of course, TikTok, but I think LinkedIn is a hugely important platform now too. And, you know, there's newness every day, but I think people and brands need to think about where their time is best spent, because you can't be everywhere. And you know, content is a beast that can never be fed, basically.
Right.
So
Right.
you have to decide where and how you want to commit those resources.
Well, let's go back a little bit. You referenced it a little bit, the DKNY PR Girl. Like, so how did that start? Like,
Sure. So first of all, I spent 17 years working at Donna Karan. That was the bulk of my career after I left the magazine side of the business back in the late 90s. And I started in PR in accessories and had a very traditional publicist role. So that was working with magazine editors, working on fashion shows, doing celebrity dressing, all the things that sort of publicists did back then and probably still do. And in 2009, we were sitting around a meeting, marketing meeting, deciding, oh, there's this platform called Twitter, sort of like how we're doing now with like Be Real and I guess what we did with TikTok, a couple of years ago. Sort of thinking, okay, how do we embark on this platform? Like, how do we show up there? What does it mean? And because I was a publicist, I was like, well, we cannot have the handle be at Donna Karan because people will think she's tweeting. And that's
Right.
going to be a nightmare. And then who is writing that script? And it just becomes treacherous. So it was like high season, like Gossip Girl. And I was like, well, why can't it just be anonymous like Gossip Girl? Why can't it just be a character represented by a fashion sketch? And everyone was kind of like, oh, that's cool. Like, yeah, like, why do we need to say who it is? So we sort of presented this idea back to our boss, Patty, and she loved it. And then she's like, oh, run it by legal. So we ran it by legal, which you can appreciate. And legal, love her to death, Lynn. She was like, okay, but only one person can have access to the Twitter handle. Aliza, only you can tweet. I was like, okay, mind you, I had no idea what that even meant. I had never been on Twitter before. So I started like initiation by fire, and sort of figured it out as I went and started to really pay acute attention to what really generated engagement. And what generated engagement was telling a really great story. And that was the beginning. That was before Instagram. That was before we knew the word influencer. That was before other fashion brands were on social media in that way. So DKNY PR Girl really does get the credit of being like one of the first in the space. And then sort of was the first example of like someone other than like the spokesperson or a designer. I mean, this was a made up character that we put front and center to be able to use as a brand filter, really, to tell the other part of our brand story.
So you were saying that it was trial by fire. Like, what were you finding? What was engaging to people?
Not selling anything. So very early on, I'm pretty allergic to sales as a general statement. Like, I don't enjoy talking about prices of things. So even as a publicist, like I really tried to focus on like the story or the inspiration for the season versus like, here's our new handbag for $4.95 or whatever it was. So I kind of set up these rules for myself where I decided that I really wasn't going to talk about buying anything. And I was going to tell the brand story through the lens of my job as a PR girl living in New York City. So really fly on the wall experience, which by the way, back then, it was 2009, like especially luxury brands, like no one really exposed behind the scenes in that way. And when I say behind the scenes, I mean like when things were getting messed up, like, it was Oscar season and I sent my gowns to LAX and LAX loses them all. Like that kind of sort of behind the scenes drama of like what really happens during awards season from a publicist point of view. No one was talking about that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So telling that story allowed me to sort of immerse people in the brand without having to be like, and here's this dress that you can buy at Bergdorf Goodman.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, isn't that interesting though, because it's like different kinds. So you can be real and get engagement, right, with you being in Twitter, but then everybody knows in Instagram, nobody wants to see everybody's real life.
But they sure want to see it on TikTok.
But they want to see it on TikTok and apparently Be Real, which is the whole name is supposed to be like that. But do people really, so how do you do that? Are you doing like 5 different strategies depending on what it is? It's like.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So content made for the medium matters.
Yeah.
And because all of these platforms are having like, I don't even know if you can call it a midlife identity crisis, but they're all having identity crises. Essentially the vertical video content that you're creating for TikTok works for Instagram Reels, not vice versa. And I think at the end of the day, thinking about what works on the platform and modeling behavior is the way to win. Now, as far as Be Real is concerned, Instagram and TikTok both just copied that front and back camera, time of day that you can post something and be real. So, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen to that platform, but it's real tough to be in the social media platform technology space right now.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so how long were you DKNY PR Girl? I want to go back a little bit.
6 years, but I did it as a side hustle to my day job. So I had my I was senior vice president of global communications. And I did that whole job. And then there was this like second screen on my desk, sort of like my finance husband, where I was just like Twitter all day long. And I loved it. It was a passion. It was an obsession, actually.
That's so crazy. And like, you did so much for the brand.
I feel like the brand did so much for me in that sense because I was a senior, sort of long-standing, respectful employee. They gave me such long bandwidth. Like I mean, what I was able to do without any oversight, it just wouldn't have been done at another company.
Yeah.
Like they really trusted me. And that's why it was successful because it was total freedom with the mentality of, okay, I am a publicist. Like I do understand the boundaries, but still I got away with a lot.
And then how long before people knew who you were? When were you exposed?
So I was anonymous for 2 years, which is crazy when you think about it. And the people who knew, was a very, very small group of people, kept the secret. And then we sort of decided to, reveal the person behind the Twitter handle. But more than that, what I found myself doing all the time was like tweeting career advice and like how to become a publicist or how to break into fashion. That's where I really, unintentionally dropped the breadcrumbs of what would eventually be my book.
Right. Okay. And so that experience that led you to your book? Talk about that a little bit.
I mean, I got a call one day. I was sitting at my desk and it was from this woman, Amanda, who was an editor at Grand Central. And she said, I follow you on Twitter. I read your blog. I think you should write a book. And I was like, that's really funny. Thank you so much. But no. I was like, I have 2 little kids. I have a full-time major job. Like, no, I cannot write a book. And she just stayed on me and she was like, well, in nonfiction, you could just write a short proposal and submit that and you can buy your book off that. And I was like, thank you, but no, thank you. And she just pushed me really hard and she won. So yeah. I did it.
And then coming up with that and that name that launched your whole company and podcast, but you can say how it happened, but it's like that became you.
Well, I would say that makes it sound like I had this grand plan. So I definitely did not have a grand plan. I would say that I had my day job, which I very much, and I think people can relate to this, like I identified as my job. Mm-hmm. So I was Aliza from DKNY. Like that was part of my persona. And then I had a book. And those were 2 separate entities. But when I left the company, and you start to think of yourself like, oh, wait, I don't have that big title anymore. I'm not part of LVMH. I don't have a big job. I don't have millions of followers. What's left? Mm-hmm. And I actually had to think long and hard as to what I wanted my personal brand to stand for. So I used Leave Your Mark really as a foundation and didn't have this big plan of like, I'm going to add all these things onto it. It was more like, okay, one step at a time. What do I want to do next? Okay, that makes sense. I'm going to add it on. I went in and out of consulting, back to full-time roles over and over again before I realized that I should extend it into a podcast. So it definitely was, a journey for sure.
Right. I mean, and we have them, but that's what I love hearing about. I love hearing about these journeys. And I think it's so important for women to hear that too, because like you said, you started out as a traditional fashion PR publicist. That does not mean that that's what you have to be for the rest of your life, right? There's many twists and turns. Who would have thunk that you would be, DKNY PR girl and a new medium, social media that totally took off, that then opened up other doors for you. You know what I mean? You never know what's around the corner.
Yes.
Following passions and being curious and staying open to new ideas,
Absolutely. And I think also like not waiting for things to be perfect is like another thing that I live by,
Yes.
because so many people are like perfectionists and they're like, I'm going to make this whole plan. Like I didn't. I kind of was fly by the seat of my pants. Like, I'm going to start a podcast. Oh, I don't know how to start a podcast. I'm going to Google it. Like, you just sort of learn as you go, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You learn as you go, you learn on the job, and so many women are scared, like, I have to be 100% prepared or 130% prepared. And it's just not possible. Like, there's no way for you to get a promotion and do something that is new or start a business and be fully prepared, I mean, you also have the things that you can't control, pandemics,
Yeah.
children, all the things that you have to just be ready for life to throw at you. So I love hearing the stories of like the person who is like meant to be the expert still is like referring back to your book and be like, wait, what should I do with this? It's like me, the lawyer, and hiring a lawyer. It's like, of course I have to hire a lawyer. I'm not going to negotiate for myself the same way.
Of course. Yeah. And I also think like by the time you figure it out all perfectly, like someone's done it.
True.
And maybe better. So it's like, you may as well like put your stake in the ground and be like, I'm here, I'm doing this now. Like, you can join me, but like, I'm here.
Right.
And that I sort of live by that.
So tell me about then when you started the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I really thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was. I met with so many production companies. They all sort of said no. And they all wanted really like celebrity level talent with built-in audiences. And I was pretty disheartened. I was like, God, I really thought I have like a legitimate best-selling book. Like, wouldn't they want to work with me for my podcast? But the answer, Jen, is no, they did not want to. And I was kind of like, I was done with my full-time role at the time. I was at a different company by that time. And I was kind of like, am I going to let that stop me? Just because they said no? Like, I'm going to be good at this. Like, I always wanted to be a talk show host, like my entire life. So I'm like, this is my way of being a talk show host, and I can be on the air forever. No one can kick me off.
Exactly.
And, I leaned on friends who had done podcasts, and I leaned on Google, and, you figure it out. And of course, you're on season 2 now. And it's funny because when I did season 1, I had banked 8 episodes, and I'm like, I am so sitting back, relaxed now. I have these 8 episodes. I don't have to think about this. But you fly through that content, and then all of a sudden you're like, lost your lead. And then it's like this hamster wheel. Like,
right.
Once you start, it's really hard to get off. Do you feel that way?
Yes, I like took a few months off from recording, but for me, it's like, I know that the women that I'm interviewing are so interesting. They're going to have so much to offer who is listening to this. And, I started because this is real tactical advice that I don't do a lot of preparation because I already know what women need to know and hear and learn. And, we don't have enough, women giving women advice. And so there's just never enough. You could be saying the same thing as somebody that I interviewed next week, and it'll still sound differently and resonate differently to somebody else. You know what I mean?
I totally agree.
Yeah, I don't know when I'd ever be able to run out of content when I'm just interviewing really women who their voices have never been heard as much. I mean, you just said it yourself. It's like you got a best-selling book and they're telling you that you're not worthy of a podcast, when I know a ton of people getting them left and right who have nothing to say. You know what I mean?
Now, that is a fact. That is a fact. But
Yes.
I think that's a great point. It's like, who makes those decision makers the ultimate decision makers? I think at the end of the day, you decide if that is the ultimate decision.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I mean, what do we do with our content is the other thing. It's like, do you want your content to teach you something, to inspire you? Like, look, I love Beyonce to death. I worked with her. I can never be her. What, like, I can read one interview with her a year. That's it. It's not going to do anything for me. It's just going to distract me. And then sometimes, for some people, depress you. It's like, wow, I really there's this you know what I mean? It's like, you want to be a successful woman. And so it's like, I want to be around people who are like me, that inspire me, because I know that I can do it. I'm
Oh,
not
I'm the
able.
same way. I
Yeah.
mean, I think in a funny way, but the podcasting is almost selfish because it's like who you want to connect with, what you want to learn, and who
Yeah.
you want to surround yourself with. But it's true. And I think, you said it before, it's like that tactical advice. I mean, that's also, one of the things that I really strive for in Leave Your Mark, because when you do hear Beyonce or you do hear these very, unbelievable people's stories, it's hard to relate because you're not going to be Beyonce. Like, we're
Yeah.
not going to be Beyonce. So
Yeah.
then what's the learning there? So
Yeah.
I do agree.
Yeah. And for us to like really elevate each other, that's what it's going to take, right? Understanding each other's journeys for sure and get advice. So on that, because so many people are trying to figure out, women and, female founded companies and women, like, do I need to be a brand? If I have a brand, am I also supposed to be the brand? And is that, muddying waters? And how do you make these determinations? Like, what is this? It's like, it's so easy for you, but it's like, how do people analyze when they deserve your time even?
Well, I don't think it's easy for anyone, but I will say this. I am a firm believer in there is no such thing as professional versus personal. So if you are someone who engages on social media, if you speak to people in the world, if you show up in an office, if you have meetings, you are one person. You already have a personal brand. We all have personal brands. The thing to decide is how you impact or don't, right?
Mhm.
So I always like to think of it as like, what do people say about you when you enter a room? What do they say about you when you leave? What impact are you making? So at the end of the day, it's like we all have choices. We decide who we are friends with. We decide what causes we align with. We decide what we want to talk about and get behind. We decide what we don't. All those choices make up your personal brand. So when we talk about founders and people who want to be entrepreneurs or start companies, or even someone who has a corporate job, at the end of the day, like, are you your brand? I think you are, because no one is going to speak about what you do better than you
Mhm.
if you properly plan for it. And it's not easy to do it. And a lot of people feel like a deer in headlights when they talk about it. But if it's something that you are passionate about, like when you start a company, like you're usually solving a problem that you're innately familiar with, right? That's usually, like, especially female founders, they're usually solving something that actually was an issue for them. So I think, again, going back to storytelling, like authentically sharing why you started something or why you believe so strongly in a mission, like that's really powerful. So yes, I do think they should be one and the same. And I think, when it comes to personal, like we all are in control of what we put out for public consumption, right? So if you're a well-known person and you don't want paparazzi following you around with your kids, don't post your kids on social media. Like,
Right.
don't put them out there for consumption. It seems like stupid, but you become fair game. And I think for regular people, there can be boundaries. You don't have to share every single thing on social media, but share the parts that make you human and share the parts that will maybe inspire others to come along on your journey.
Right. Right. Well, let's say somebody is though a brand, like let's take away, right? Two female founders. Should they also be posting on their own? Is that like part of, you know what I mean? Should you parse it out like that? Like how is something like that when you're a company like that?
I believe they should, because plenty of founders get fired from their companies.
Right.
So if you are the brand on one account, you might not be one day. I mean, I'll never forget. I mean, this is dating myself, but you'll remember like when Grace Marabella got fired from Marabella magazine. Like literally her name is the
Right.
name of the
Yeah.
magazine. So you can't depend on protection from your company. So I think that there's going to be cross-pollination and there should be synergy, but yes, you should stand, your first name and your last name should mean something regardless of the company you work at or own, period, end of report.
Right. Got it. So what are the things that you see other than what we just discussed, people or I mean, women in particular, like what do you see things that they are not doing properly or correct, or advice for them that they could up their game in leaving their mark?
So there's two extremes that I see right now. One is, and I'm actually doing a boot camp on this in the community in a couple of weeks. One is where they don't realize that their social media can impact their role. So if you work at a company, it's really easy to think like, well, this is my personal social media and I don't own that company. I just work at that company. So what I say on my personal social media should not affect my standing at that company.
Right.
But in fact, it does. And we've seen over and over again, people get fired or in severe trouble for things that they post on social media. So that's really one extreme. Everything you say or do on the internet, I tweeted this last week, is written in a Sharpie.
Yeah,
and can
I
be
saw
used
that. Yeah,
against
no,
you.
it's so
Okay?
true.
It can be used against you. That's one extreme. The other extreme is too many women wait for someone to notice that they're really good at what they do.
Right.
And that is a surefire way to have promotions and opportunities handed to other people. Like, you need to be able to speak about the value you add.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's the whole thing about women not really bragging. I had Cindy Gallup on here and she was, I want women to bullshit, because when they're bullshitting, they're not even probably bullshitting, and they're never going to bullshit as much as men do. And like she goes on, and I'm totally paraphrasing it. Like we put it in a TikTok and it has like hundreds of thousands of views because of it, you know?
She's amazing. You know, she also evolved to be that confident, right? And I think that's the other thing. It's like, just because you are one way now doesn't mean you can't learn.
True. That's an amazing point. People always say, like, how do you have your confidence? I was like, I'm not confident every day. Today I was like tired. I wasn't confident. I was like, oh, it's like I don't know what I'm doing half the time. Everyone feels like that, male or female. Everybody feels like that at times. And after a while, given experience, that's the one, great thing. I mean, there's a lot of great things with aging, but it's like getting older is like your experience, like what you can think of and make decisions on a dime would take you, weeks and months, years ago. And these are things that you get from experience. And so, and confidence also being, one of them, and confidence in your convictions and what you want to stand for and create the life you want to create for your children and world you want to leave for them. These are things that, like, the older you get, the more you're like, this is who I am and I want purpose in my life,
Absolutely. I mean, experience, and I would say also track record. I feel like when you've sort of done something really well before and you hit that point where you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. It's like reflecting back on, well, that time that you did really well, or somebody else did it really well, where you can model that behavior. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, everyone is just trying to figure it out. Like, there's nobody who has this all solved, right?
Exactly.
So it's like, we're all making the smartest decisions we can based on the knowledge we currently have.
Right. Exactly. And, any other circumstances that are in the way, right?
Yeah, totally.
So tell us that you have a boot camp. Tell us about that. Tell us how people can learn from you.
Yes. So on my website, alizalicht.com, there's a lot of navigations, but one of them is community. And this was something that this was not even my idea. A lot of the things I do are not my ideas. Like, there were people who are much smarter or see things in my orbit that I don't even see. And this particular idea came from someone who DM'd me on Instagram. Her name is Eliana Meyer. And she was just like, I feel like there's like a whole generation of women who didn't read Leave Your Mark. Maybe we're too young for DKNY PR Girl, but like would really benefit from this. And my passion has always been mentorship. So I was like, well, how can I find these people and like bring them together? So it's really like a way for me to mentor at scale, and also bring in like really kick-ass women who are just like really trying to leave their own marks and network with each other. So it's people who are probably within the first 10 years of working. And it's a private community. It's not on social media, but it is on its own app. So it's a really safe space. And I think that really creates an environment where people feel comfortable to like really talk about stuff they're going through professionally and have other people weigh in. I weigh in, of course. And then, of course, I'm there as a DM away for anything, one-to-one that needs to happen. But it's something, I really enjoy it. And I've been doing, since the pandemic, I've been doing a lot more live mentorship classes. I just did one on the resume master class last week with two of my good friends who are executive recruiters, Christy Hurt and Megan Hool. And I think, I don't know, it's the same reason you're doing this. It's to share and pay forward like everything that we've learned and to just abolish gatekeeping, because that's really, at the end of the day, I think what we're all trying to do.
Look, this is our version of fantasy football, and you know what I mean? It's like the ways that men engage, from small boys, as I see it in my son versus my daughter, like they're all on playing Roblox and on FaceTime together, and they're sharing information. They're talking about stuff. They're talking about in their different, like in real life sports, and they play a fantasy football league, and they do all this stuff where it's like they're constantly sharing information while, girls and women are like taking care of stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, it's enough. Like, we're not going to bridge that wealth gap, which is really, I think, is the important thing. The pay gap is obviously, but that's because the patriarchy controls it. But the matriarchy, if we build that and close the wealth gap, then we have real power and a real say over ourselves, our families, our autonomy, everything on a global level. And so, being able to do that and share this information is super important. So yeah, it's our fantasy football league.
I love it. And I'm the least athletic person ever. So I'm glad that ours requires just talking.
Well, it's what we like to do. We like to share information. We just often I'm sharing it about like the best, hairstylist or the best nanny, or where, whatever. It's like, let's share our business tips, right? And I know so many women, and brand, like that is such a huge thing for women to really want to understand. So if they want to find you, they can go on to
alizalicht.com or on Instagram, alizalichtxo, LinkedIn. I'm literally every channel you're on, I'm there. And reach out. There's a lot of ways to get in touch.
Amazing. You've been so awesome. I know that you have other things to do, so we will let you go. However, there is one question I ask everybody on this podcast, and that is, what is the worst advice you've ever received?
I love it. The worst advice I've ever received. Such a good one. Well, I think that let's start with who's the messenger of the advice, right? I think when people are asking other people for advice, you first have to be really careful with who you're soliciting from, because not everyone has your best interest. So generally speaking, when I sort of suss that out, if someone tells me not to do something, I pretty much know that I need to do it.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I think in general, if you find yourself sort of your parade being rained on a lot, you kind of have to ask yourself, like, what is the intention of that person?
Yeah.
And I think, if you have great ideas, like, run with them. Like, don't squash them. Don't let someone squash your ideas. So that's what I would say.
No, I agree. I 100% agree. That's actually kind of that's whole Jay-Z. It was always Jay-Z's motto. It's like, oh, they're going to tell me not to do it, I'm definitely doing it.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
You have to, and you have to think about who's giving you this advice. I had a young woman on here. She was a chess champion. She's just graduated from college, and she was like, really wants to be in politics. And every male politician she works for said, oh, honey, you don't want to run for office. Why don't you be the person next to it? You don't want to do that. It's like, oh my God, it's still happening at 22. Just FYI.
Not surprised.
Anyway, thank you so much for coming on. All your amazing sage advice. Everyone check her out. Just told you where to find her. So thank you. And for everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. Until next time, I'm Jennifer Justice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.